So it's been a bit of a busy time here lately in the Moscow Christian Nationalist Club. Um, you've got Doug Wilson now, the OG. Been ride or die for a lot of people for years with him. You know, they'll defend to the bitter end his false gospel. They will defend to the bitter end his godless conduct. And yet, when he says, hey guys, maybe it's not godly to hate the Jews, everybody loses their minds. You know, Joel Webbin, Brian Sauvé, they're the new Doug Wilsons. They've out Doug Wilson. And then you've got Apologia, who's just as confused as they've always been. I don't think they realize that theonomy and, let's just say Christian nationalism, for lack of a better term, Baptists have not historically prospered under those kinds of regimes. A lot of Baptists end up dead. Presbyterians and Baptists can get along so long as the Presbyterians are not in charge of the government. Things get a little hairy for Baptists at that point. But maybe when Doug Wilson, theonomy, Christian nationalism rules over America, he'll keep Apologia and his people zoo. They were one of the good ones. Jeff Durbin can be a court jester in Doug Wilson's court. James White can be an exhibit at the local zoo. Anyway, I never thought I would be sympathetic towards Doug Wilson, but I will say this: Doug Wilson is being a man by sticking to it is wrong and unbiblical to hate people because of a, ethnicity or whatever else. In this situation, it's ethnicity. Because, apparently the Jews are the bane of everybody's problems. And I've thought this for a while, that the alt-right guys from 8 years ago have wanted to find some sort of moral foundation, and they found it in Christianity, yet I don't think they've actually found Christ. They've found Christ to be a political and moral Messiah. Something to rally around. And I don't know. I'm very disturbed by what I see nowadays in so-called Christianity, Christian circles. I used to think the Reformed community was kind of a bastion as far as the gospel, as far as the importance of Scripture, as far as godliness. And I am more and more disenfranchised with Reformed circles because I think Reformed circles have been tolerating people like Doug Wilson for far too long. And now Doug Wilson has made disciples like Eric Kahn and Brian Sauvé and A.D. Robles and Joel Webbin. These people learn from him. That serrated edge is godless. And these guys are taking it to its logical conclusion. Doug Wilson, for all his faults, at least has some boundaries for his serrated edge. He doesn't have a foundation for it because it does not advocate Christ-likeness. He comes up with his little sayings of, the faithful men, hard times call for faithful men, not careful men. Basically, if you're going to be faithful, you have to sin or use foul language, which I don't recall seeing in the Bible. And no, Paul saying scubalon is not Paul cursing, much as the carnal men would like it to be. I think the epitome of what is wrong with reformed circles, and I really don't think he's reformed, is 80 Robles. I've harped on him before, but is this the kind of guy that we're looking to in Christianity and conservative Christianity as young men? Is a man like that who goes around mocking people, making fun of people, saying just foul words, and then just mocking people that would come out against that or come out against his conduct? I'm sorry, is living on the internet all day, is that something we'd aspire to be like? I don't think calling people gay or saying things are gay is admirable. I did that in middle school when I was a heathen. I did that in high school. And these are the kinds of people that talk about being a man and Christian men and standing up. And it's like, these men are in fact little boys cosplaying as Christian men, labeling everybody and everything that disagrees with them as gay or effeminate, calling them cowardly as they get in arguments on the internet. Give me a break. You don't know the first thing about being a man, let alone being a man of God. You don't know the first thing about bravery. I mean, that little boy over on the evangelical dark web was calling James White a coward because he didn't have his comment section opened, or the likes and dislikes had them disabled on one of the videos that he was looking at, and so therefore James White was a coward. Well, James White's done that for years, and James White is not the kind of guy that I would call a coward. He has stood for truth. He has been faithful. He goes around the world and debates Muslims in Muslim countries. I wouldn't call that cowardly. I'm sorry, you live on the internet, evangelical dark web guy. You are on Twitter all day. You are on YouTube all day. I don't know what exactly you do for a living, but I can't imagine that you're working too terrible hard if you're spending that much time on the internet. Paul says in the scriptures to imitate him as he imitates Christ. I don't see any of these men actually imitating Christ. 80 Robles or Brian Sabe or whoever can tell me Christ is king or glorify God or bow to Christ alone all day till they're blue in the face. And having seen their conduct, seen what they support, what they say, how they act, I don't buy any of it, and I am unmoved by it. It means nothing. Many will say to Christ on that day, Lord, Lord. I see nothing in these men to imitate or admire. And sadly, these prey upon young, disenfranchised men who are dejected by the fact that feminism has obliterated the dating scene. That they're constantly being told they need to be ashamed of being white and being men. That they have no strong male role models, whatever else. I don't see any real emphasis upon this crowd of regeneration and that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. The gospel is what changes men who in turn change the culture. I see them preaching very much a social gospel. It is the conservative opposite of the liberal social gospel. I think we need to find better leaders in conservative Christianity. I think we need to stop tuning out the internet celebrity Christian personalities. I think we need to move back to preachers, old-time preachers, Paul Washer, J. Vernon McGee, MacArthur to a certain extent. I think a lot of these younger guys, I think Jeff Durbin himself is confused. I think he has been badly influenced by Doug Wilson. I've heard Durbin preach. I think he's solid, but at this point, I think he's compromised. I think Durbin is a Christian. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying I think he has been taken in and bewitched and falsely influenced by Doug Wilson. And seeing his and Apologia's conduct for the last several years, especially after he decided to use that foul word at one of his talks, which that was about the end. That was the end of Apologia for me. That was really hard too. But it's like, okay, I see what you guys are saying. People come out, there's a backlash, and then you want to accuse them of being the ungodly ones, that they're making the prophets look bad because the prophets said worse. No, the prophets didn't say worse. You're foul. You wanted to be edgy, and it backfired. You alienated fellow Christian brothers by saying, well, you care more about this than you care about the fact that children are being murdered. No, I care about both. You don't honor God by cursing. And if you have to rely on foul language to shock the audience that you're speaking to, you're probably immature in the Lord. Paul Washer, others can say some very shocking things, and they don't curse. They just exposit the Bible, preach. I think we need to move away from the Moscow movement because it's toxic and it's breeding people that are even more toxic than Doug Wilson. Joel Webben is, at this point, more toxic than Doug Wilson. I've always thought Eric Kahn was toxic. He's talk about little boys cosplaying as Christian men. He says things to draw attention to himself, and that's not godly at all. We need to find better role models. And I would propose we look at our local churches. I know not everybody has the benefit of a very theologically deep church. They might be pretty simple, but you know what? There's joy in simplicity sometimes. You know, some of the best preachers I've heard, some of the most pastoral men I have seen have been the guys that aren't, you know, super reformed. Or even if they are reformed in their doctrine, they're not just talking about being reformed. They don't just talk about it. They preach. These are men I admire that have servants' hearts, that are slow to anger, slow to speak, quick to listen. Their words bring healing and encouragement. They are not quick to being insulted. These men turn the other cheek. They are compassionate. They care about those under their care. They exhort and they encourage through the word. I do not see that from A.D. Robles. I don't see that from Doug Wilson. I see people stirring up angst in young men to go out and burn ships and take cities. I don't see these men being encouraging men to be in prayer. To be in prayer unceasingly, to be humble, I know they've said these things, but I don't see them actually living them out. I see what they do as far different and far worse, but I don't just want to ramble on. There's lots of things I could say, but we need to be careful of who we listen to, and I think we need to start turning away from the internet Christian personalities, turning away from Apologia, turning away from A.D. Robles and Doug Wilson and Joel Webben and whoever else. about all I have to say on the matter.